Hello and welcome back to another ATARC webinar. Today, topic experts will share strategies that agencies can implement to alleviate the concern of the unknown and make operations more efficient. My name is Kirsten Kotsaruba, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's panel discussion. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and we are a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. We provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. So before we begin, I just want to encourage you all to please submit questions of your own in the Q&A section of this platform. And also be sure to answer the poll questions as we go through to ensure that you receive your CPE credit. Now that that is all out of the way, I'd like to welcome our panelists to please come on camera, and you can go ahead and unmute yourself because we're going to begin with a round of introductions. So please share with our audience who you are, what agency or organization you represent, and what your role is there. So if we could start with Shanti, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. My name is Shantae Singletary. I work for CMS. I am the acting director for the Division of Security, Privacy, Compliance. I've been working for this agency for the last 5 years and been very involved with anything related to GRC, compliance, risk assessment, and the ATO authorization process.
Fantastic, thank you. Let's jump over to Randy.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Randy Carlson. I am the Chief of the Information Security Office at the Bureau of Economic Analysis, so at the Department of Commerce. I've been in this role 7.5 years, and it's good to be here. And this is a major, last thing, ATO management and controls management are a major part of our security posture, and this is great to be here.
Thank you. And Dr. Sarbari Gupta, let's hear from you next.
Yes, Sarbari Gupta, happy to be here. I'm the founder and CEO of Electrosoft. I've been working in the cybersecurity field for over 25 years in a variety of areas, but I've had the privilege to work with NIST in co-authoring some of their special publications. For example, the recently released 863-4 on identity management guidelines. And regarding our company, Electrosoft, we've been supporting a variety of civilian as well as DoD agencies in doing cybersecurity projects since 2001. And so we've had a first-hand sort of view on the compliance processes, how ATOs get done, assessment authorization activities, lots of experiences and lessons learned on that hopefully maybe OSCAL can alleviate some of those. And we're also very honored to be able to sponsor this event. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. And Shane, let's hear from you next.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Shane Barney. I'm Chief Information Security Officer for USCIS. Actually, I'm sort of temporarily acting deputy CIO as well. So I'm wearing lots of hats lately. I have arguments with myself and still somehow lose. So, as obviously as CISO, I have a tremendous oversight and responsibilities as it relates to, ATOs for all of our many systems, as well as the integration and how that all works. USCIS has hotly pursued automation in a number of areas, ATOs being just one of them. So the subject is near and dear to my heart. We have been pursuing it passionately for quite some time, actually. So I'm excited to be here.
Yes, awesome. And then last but certainly not least, Michaela, I've been on so many calls where people refer to you as the mother of OSCAL. So please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me here. So my name is Michaela Yarga, and I wear multiple hats at NIST, but for the purpose of today's webinar, I'm going to wear the one of the OSCAL, or Open Security Controls Assessment Language Strategic Outreach Director. I'm also Senior Technical Lead at National Institute of Standards and Technologies, or NIST. And I focused my expertise for the past more than a decade on cloud security and cloud forensic.
Awesome. And Michaela, while I have you talking with the floor right now, we were going to start off by just kind of an opening of what is OSCAL, if you could provide to us definition or some perspective on that.
Absolutely. So taking just one step back, OSCAL emerged as a need when government agencies were basically required to move services to the cloud. And we had the cloud first mandate, and then we had the cloud smart mandate. And we had a lot of struggle on trying to understand the complexity of the systems and trying to elevate the security postures of our systems. It was very frustrating trying to go around and guide government agencies on how to best still meet the FISMA requirements while they have that clear understanding and meet the responsibilities that fall upon them or that. So despite the fact that for many cybersecurity experts out there, the compliance and security are perceived as disparate concepts. Compliance and security are, in my humble opinion, the two sides of the same coin. So what makes the distinction is the triggering mechanism. So for security, the measures are driven by the business risks, while for compliance is fueled by the legal obligations and by the desire to demonstrate to our clients that that they can be trusted. So taking that overall picture and having in mind that complexity of the systems when you adopt cloud solutions, the idea was that automation is the one that has to be in place, but not any of the proprietary solutions that existed. Not that they were not good, but they were not really allowing to provide the interoperability. So at NIST, we've been working alongside with the industry to develop and advance what we refer to as the Open Security Controls Assessment Language, or OSCAL. OSCAL is a standardized and a flexible open source language that allows security controls and their associated implementation and assessment methods to be represented in machine-readable formats with easy transformations into human-friendly representations. And that was very, very important from the very beginning. The flexibility of allowing the same language to be used for multiple regulatory frameworks and representation of the information that is necessary. So OSCAL is important because it provides, as I said, a standard-based foundation for the next generation of compliance processes and tools, and allow for a better secure automation and interoperability. Allows us as consumers of cloud services to have an understanding of the service security posture without spending a lot of time on doing a manual assessment and going through manual assessment processes. So OSCAL supports by design, and that was our promise from the very beginning, versatility and flexibility. What I mean by that is OSCAL with no changes can be used to represent multiple regulatory frameworks or proprietary requirements. It provides a fine granularity for the assessment, which is a huge need when it comes to complex systems, but it's something that is very difficult for humans to address. And OSCAL also provides information traceability with no duplication. So you don't need to go back to the initial controls or to initial profile, to the tailoring of that, to the SSP, or invoking a manual process. It allows you to have those unique identifiers that are by design into OSCAL to trigger and signal where the changes are. So it's also allowing organically shifting left the security trees through the system decompositions and in pre-assessment and reusability of the components of your system.
Thank you so much, Michaela, for setting the stage for us and giving us all a better understanding for folks at home if they weren't aware before. Jumping into my first question, I just want to set the stage here that the security authorization of agency information systems is a labor-intensive, tedious process to implement, document, and validate the hundreds of security controls required by the risk management framework. Randy, I actually want to talk to you next. If you don't mind, could you describe how this process is implemented within federal organizations and the types of productivity tools or other tools that are used in the life cycle of the ATO process?
Sure. I do want to back up just slightly with the question in that it's really important to understand the environment regarding security authorization control frameworks right now. What we've got framework sprawl, for lack of a better term. You've got multiple regulatory, particularly with cloud coming in, you've got multiple regulatory frameworks that you've got to snap into your ANA somehow, okay? And you can do that. The system's flexible enough to do it. It's only flexible enough to do it because there's good people who know enough about the environment and the system to manually snap those things in, usually via spreadsheet. So what you've got is essentially generally a very manual process. It's generally one that's changing a lot. It's generally one where a new requirement comes in with the cloud. You have to do a lot of manual crosswalk between the controls. Even if the cloud provider is FedRAMP, that you've got to make sure that they integrated in one integrated security plan, because that's generally how 853 likes to see, and how auditors like to see it work as well. So really, you're really stuck right now, not necessarily within 853's ATO process, but between all of the other regulatory frameworks that federal CISOs are hit with. You're really stuck with a very labor-intensive way to crosswalk those things. Either you crosswalk them, you can use the cloud controls matrix through the Cloud Security Alliance is a handy tool to use. There's other ones out there, but it's not quite automated yet. And so it's a very manual process, and it's one that's growing a lot. So we've got one other mandate. I just want to close with this, which is that we are now in the middle of Zero Trust. And Zero Trust has a premium on automation. And so the only way we're going to get from there to here is to have something that's a common language between all of these different frameworks that CISOs are grappling with right now, because it's unlikely that the frameworks are going to reduce, that the appetite for generating a new framework or new as it becomes more and more complex, it's unlikely that's going to lessen. So you've got to have something that's going to broker between those. I think OSCAL might solve a very prominent problem. This is one of my top 3 problems, and has been for a while, and it's a very wicked one, frankly, for a lot of different reasons. And so short answer, it's mostly manual now. Within enclaves, we can't automate it, but writ large, everything I'm looking at, we can't really escape the manual process.
Thank you, Randy. Shane, I want to jump to you next, and I want to hear from a few of our other panelists on this too, but starting with Shane, what do you see as the major choke points and hurdles and challenges in performing security authorization using the existing processes and tools?
Well, there's a number of fronts. I mean, I think a lot of the points on the manual nature of the process is definitely part of it. There's also issues with how you communicate those plans and the details of those plans, whether it's security plans, whether it's the other documentation, and how that's all managed, sort of not just at the agency level, but also at the the department level, because they have to have certain levels of visibility. And there's the entire POAM process that are wrapped around it and making sure and updating that. And when you add into it environments like USCIS's, for example, which is we are a heavy cloud organization, 95% plus cloud. We have been for quite some time. Everything we do is agile development. I mean, while I'm on this call, we'll probably do 4 major releases in 3 of our major HVA systems. And that's a normal day for us. So, staying on top of that and making sure that the compliance and the regulatory side of what we do from a security perspective is in lockstep with that level, that velocity of development is critical. Now, USCIS, the solution to that was ongoing authorization, breaking down the overall ANA process into kind of manageable chunks and parts. We've automated considerable pieces of it. For USCIS, development is like breathing. So even on the security side, I have development teams and integration teams that work actively to help with that. We've also solved it in other ways where we engage the development teams and had them become part of the solution. But at the end of the day, we still are seeing these major hurdles where, lack of, especially on the framework side where, constantly shifting frameworks, having a standard set language that we can all talk to and speak in, it really, I think it was NIST that referred to this as the Rosetta Stone. It's a brilliant analogy because it really does reduce the ability, our ability to communicate really complex security requirements into something that's more manageable. More importantly, from my perspective as a CISO, it allows me to communicate that on multiple platforms in multiple ways, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, in somewhat approaching near real time. I've always seen the risk management side, the compliance side, as critical, not because they in and of themselves add tremendous value, but they are part of the overall security program, and they need to be factored in our risk-making decisions. There's a lot of valuable information that we lose sort of in the paper process that is sort of the ATO process of today. Getting to a point where I can actually utilize that information in a real way at a development level is just, that's the end state goal. That's what we're after. We're already piloting some aspects around that now and moving out, and we've found some hurdles, some successes. But it really does hold the promise for where we're going, especially when you factor in, as Randy mentioned, the zero trust aspects.
Thank you, Shane. Shantae, I'd love to hear from you next, what some of your thoughts and perspective is on this question.
Sure. So here at CMS, we have over 200 FSMA systems, and our choke point in some areas is just, it could be the ANA process, where we're assessing the system and then making sure that we have all the proper documentation and artifacts to satisfy the assessment process. And then it also could be the authorization process. It can be a bottleneck. But what we've done in the past year or so, since we've been all pushed into a remote setting, is kind of utilizing some of the workflows in our GRC tool to help with the process of getting approval as signature and the recommendation of authorizing systems. And that's one way we were trying to kind of lessen the bottleneck and the chokehold of reauthorizing systems. Another area that we're looking into is leveraging some of the native services and tools in AWS to feed into our risk posture. So we wanted to kind of connect into those tools and look at those tools to see how it talks about risk, more so like Security Hub. Integrating that with looking to integrate that with the GRC tool or some of our other capabilities to give us better visibility and risk. I think everybody in this call can relate to the manual process, but really we're struggling just to kind of get the technical aspects of the assessment process in a visible way and speak on the risk of that system. So when it's being reauthorized, it's something that the AO can approve or disapprove. And also with the POM process, we want to make sure that we're accounting for all risk. And some risk we cannot, address at that time. So looking at some type of solution to create a risk register, so we'll know how to prepare ourselves for any type of technologies or capabilities that we're lacking to help minimize the risk in those areas. But more so the bottleneck is, documentation. A lot of people are struggling to get documentation integrated and inputted in the GRC tool. And over the last couple of years, we've been working with the OSCAL team and helping them flesh out the first iteration. We're using some of the inspect profiles, which is a a tool that we use to do configuration checks in certain environments, whether it's your operational environment, the database environment, or just specific COTS products. We're able to kind of get that visibility and seeing, what deviations are present in that environment. Like I said, everything we're using is cloud-based. Most of the things are in AWS. And we're trying to figure out how to use native services to evaluate risk, our risk posture, and how to transfer that information into a format where we can present it when it's time for a system to get reauthorized, or better track and manage it from a POAM standpoint with our GRC tool.
Fantastic, thank you. And Sabari, I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on this as well.
Sure. As a federal government contractor, and as I mentioned before, we support various agencies in the DoD sector as well as the civilian sector. Now, what we found is that, usually most of these agencies have a GRC tool. Some use it mostly as a document repository, sometimes for workflow processes and plan management, but seldom, in one case we have seen it, but seldom do they use it as a way to actually input documentation, or let's say controls or control implementation status, or to actually conduct the assessments, using the tool. Instead, what, as we all said, or Randy said earlier, it's all a bunch of Excel workbooks, Microsoft Word documents, a lot of copy paste. And so what this doesn't help with is, for example, common controls exist within agencies, and various other information systems within the agency are supposed to inherit those common controls. But today, the way that's done is by copy pasting, common control implementations from a different SSP into this other SSP. And it's just a very painful process. And there's no way to check, where it came from. I mean, I think Michaela said earlier that, OSCAL helps you to kind of provide traceability regarding the different bits of information. So none of that is really possible with the manual and, sort of the tools that we use, Excel spreadsheets and Microsoft Word documents. And also, as we move into the cloud, there's a lot more inheritance going on, right? Before, agencies used to control the entire stack for a typical information system. And so, it was all done internally within the agency. Now, moving to the cloud, so many of the controls, or parts of the controls, are to be inherited from the implementation of the cloud service provider. And there's no automated way to do it today, even though FedRAMP does allow these SSPs to be submitted in OSCAL format today. But I don't know of any agency that's being able to ingest these OSCAL-based SSPs into their GRC tools or their methodologies for developing their SSPs for the information systems they're building on top of that, let's say. Yeah. And so those are some of the things I'm seeing, based on the work we're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm going to actually call for poll question number 1 real quick. So we're going to pause while that's up there. For our audience that just joined us, be sure to respond to these poll questions as they come up so you receive your CPE credits. So poll question number 1 is on the screen for the audience. Now, diving back into our questions, it's exciting to see the progress made on OSCAL since the inception of the NIST OSCAL project. So Michaela, I want to kind of turn it back over to you and just give you an opportunity to sort of share your thoughts. My next question for our panelists, of course, is going to be, tell us if your agency is planning to embrace OSCAL and the benefits that you're expecting to see from embracing this new technology. But Dr. Michaela Iorga, what are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, all those pain points that were highlighted by my colleagues here, or things that we are aware of when we design OSCAL, and we are trying to organically, through the way we architected OSCAL, to be able to allow different mitigations against it. So OSCAL is designed to basically mirror, if you want, the risk management framework process, but it's done in such a way that you can, if you want to deviate from that and shift left, it allows you to do so as well, because we have an implementation layer where there is a control catalog model and a profile, we refer to it, model for representing baselines, which could be customized. And then we have an implementation layer that has a system security plan. And where I said that earlier, it's very innovative, allowing natively to decompose systems. We have a component definition model that allows vendors to demonstrate a document in machine readable format how their products are satisfying or are implementing controls, with the idea that once adopted, once becoming part of a system, a GRC tool that speaks OSCAL can pick up that information and align with your system, allow for the system owner to do the revision of the proposed implementation of the controls, identify also organically what are the customer responsibilities in the process. Even for cloud services, through the export mechanism in the system security plan, we allow to identify what is the customer's responsibility. And a customer can be another cloud service that is a SaaS sitting on top of IaaS. So we had in mind all those. And when it came to the assessment, we designed the assessment layer with an assessment plan model that allows for planning of the assessment results, that allows for capturing of the activities of assessment, identifying, documenting all the observations, the findings, the identified risks, and then allows through a plan of actions and milestones, also in machine readable format, to convey that information back to the system owner and align those findings with a system security plan. So as you can see, it is aligned with the risk management framework, allows you to go through the ANA process, but think a little bit outside of the box, because we mentioned here about the zero trust. And Sarbari mentioned about the 863 document that she worked. The requirements in 863 can be also represented in a catalog of requirements in OSCAL. Then you can use the overall process of assessing how those requirements are satisfied, and basically using also OSCAL as a cyber security, if you want, Esperanto or the Rosetta Stone that we are referring to it before, to push those requirements and the implementation of those requirements through a similar process, an ANA process, and allow to determine the conformant level for different systems. So as you can see, it helps beyond just the authorization to operate process. Now it can help with policies, and it can help you with automating everything, allowing to aggregate back all these findings and putting a seal, if you want, on that authorization to operate in a more elegant way, in a more automated way.
Thank you, Michaela. Shane, I know you have to jump here soon, so I definitely want to let you get a few words in here as well around embracing OSCAL and the benefits you're expecting to see.
Like I said, we started looking at OSCAL, I think about a year ago, and seeing how we would integrate it into our current processes, what we're really after, longer term. We do see some hurdles, primarily around the adoption, where if we did embrace it, it doesn't necessarily mean the greater DHS community would embrace, and how that would all work out. The other thing we really are really interested in for OSCAL is really how we incorporate sort of our ongoing, in my world, in agile development, and as aggressive as developing as we are, where we're doing several minor releases a day, sometimes several major releases in a day, documenting and maintaining a risk posture associated with that level of change, and understanding when an assessment may be needed based on the level of change happening. Those are all critical pieces for this. Now, for us, and where we really got interested in OSCAL, is how we integrate that into, say, our ongoing pipelines, and how we leverage the development processes to capture that in real time. I'm not really interested in having, my ISOs or anyone sitting around just documenting that. I would rather leverage the existing development processes to do that. So that's actually been some of our early sort of experimentation in this front, and we've seen it work. It does work actually. There are some caveats there. It's a lot of work up front. It just doesn't, it's not magic dust and that you sprinkle over something and it automatically becomes automated. A lot of investment on our side. The security program itself has to have a culture that's going to accept that and understand it and embrace that level of automation. And not only that, you've got to have on the security side, development teams and data scientists and the integration folks that work to do all that. And then, of course, you have to have the established relationships with the development teams and how that and work within their environment to capture that in real time. Like I said, we've actually started seeing the successes from that. I wouldn't say it is 100% roaring success quite yet, but it does. We see the value where we actually see the value in it, and which is why we continue to pursue it as our kind of an end state goal for us. I do see it as the sort of, if you're talking code if you're talking your ATO as code, that is your direction you got to go. And that's really what we're after. I do want real-time ATOs. I don't think that's an absurd ask. In the world that we operate in, there's no reason we can't do that. There's no reason that we can't, get out of the way of the ATO process and leverage the ATO process, as an actual risk management tool set, as opposed to sort of the, oh my gosh, we just got to document this because we're required to. I really see value there. And that's really where I hope this is going to come out of that, because, the cloud technology that we have at our disposal now enables us to do this. And if we're not taking advantage of it, then, kind of bad on us. So it really is the future. And I do apologize to everyone. I do have to drop. I have some friends at Congress who really want to talk to me. So please enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I do appreciate the invite. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Shane. We appreciate your time. Sabari, do you have anything that you would like to chime in here with?
No, I think most of the things have been said, but perhaps one aspect I can chime in on is the ability to use component definitions or to build a component registry to build an SSP. Now, what does that mean? Within agencies, there are lots of, as I mentioned, common controls or certain subsystems that are used multiple times across the agency. So if some of those elements could be described as components or identified as OSCAL components, the SSPs for those can be generated independently. And it's possible that in the future we could assemble SSPs just like using Lego blocks, using a bunch of components, put it together, and then maybe augment with a few additional system-specific controls that need to be defined. So that's something that OSCAL may help us to do down the road. But of course, it requires agencies to be very disciplined about identifying what these common components are and to kind of, develop this registry of sorts of components. Otherwise, as I mentioned earlier, the other benefit could be, again, as you are using cloud-based systems, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service, the agency SSPs that need to be developed for the cloud-based systems, it could ingest the cloud providers, control implementations if they were represented or, available in OSCAL format. And so that would save a lot of effort and also provide the traceability that, we talked about earlier. And then finally, I think as Shane just mentioned, everybody's on the DevSecOps kind of, bandwagon, and agency CI/CD pipelines. I mean, if they could be, or if the OSCAL-based tools could be integrated with the CI/CD pipelines, then it would allow for much more quick or automated sort of, approvals and releases from a security perspective.
Thank you. I'm going to call for poll question number 2 here. So if we could get that up on the screen, poll question 2 is now up for our audience at home. Again, if you just joined us, please be sure to respond for your CPE credits. That being said, Shante, I'd love to start with you on this next question. I want to ask, what do you see as the major challenges in adopting OSCAL tools and processes to streamline security authorization activities?
So here at CMS, we've been involved with OSCAL. I mean, the very first iteration of OSCAL is open controls, and we tried that out here. And one of the challenges we face is our GRC tool ingesting something in a JSON format. Another challenge that I see, and we're one of the optives in the department that's taking the lead on sponsorship. So we're asking our cloud service providers to support the OSCAL language when they are sponsored through us. And in that involvement for the last year, we've been seeing challenges on the vendor side saying they can't find people that can write up the SSP in that format, and they don't have the tool set. So really, FedRAMP is already a lengthy process. And then on top of finding someone who can write your SSP and the rest of your documentation in that language is another challenge that we've been facing the last several months. The skill set is out there. I think what it is that you have to work with your 3PO assessor, and they may not have that skill set or have the tooling to ingest that information once you have an OSCAL. So then it's really beneficial to the FedRAMP PMO office because they are working with a tool set to ingest that information. But at the end of the day, like the gentleman said before, it's really adoption. We have 200 and something systems. So that means those 207 systems will have to eventually, and a lot of those systems are maintained and owned by the same business owner, but they would have to learn the language and maintain it. Another thing that we're exploring here at CMS is looking for a GRC tool that can support the OSCAL language and ingest that information. I've heard that from a FedRAMP liaison standpoint that AWS has taken the first stab of writing up their documentation in OSCAL. And I know that we're moving from Rev 4 to Rev 5 from the FedRAMP standpoint, but that's a first step. So, and one of the challenges, and I think one of the questions that came up is like, how do you see this thing working out? And I don't see it. So for us, if you have over half of majority of systems in the AWS environment, and you're leveraging the FedRAMP package, at any given time, those FedRAMP services inside the AWS can change. And with those changes, you have to update your documentation, right? So now you have to go in your GRC tool, update, maintain all those changes. And if anybody is familiar with AWS, they're always sending out updates on their customer control matrix. There's always changes. So how do you keep up with those changes and how those changes reflect the systems at your agency? So that's one of the things that we are hoping to do is like, how can we ingest, once we are able to get that OSCAL format from AWS, how can we adjust that in our GRC tool so that those changes will inherently replicate into the systems that are in that environment? And then we wouldn't have to necessarily go in there and make any adjustments. Now, when it comes to the testing aspects of things, like I mentioned, there are technologies out there that can feed information into the OSCAL language. And that's another area that we're exploring too as well to see how that can help us down the line. But more so, how can we better manage our documentation and keep the consistency across the board? Because at the end of the day, a majority of our systems in one environment, if you're inheriting most of your system from that GSS system, you should be able to have similar control implementation details. I mean, there are going to be some controls that you would have to go in there and put your details in there. But for the most part, we see that the challenge is like, how do we stay consistent to what we're inheriting from? And we see that the OSCAL tool can help us do that and keep the consistency of the information across controlled inheritance.
Thank you, Shantae. And Randy, do you have anything that you would like to add to this question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea of having the FedRAMP, of having an OSCAL requirement in acceptance of a FedRAMP cloud vendor, I think that's an excellent idea. I mean, I don't think of that, but it's pretty. Where I'm at with it, as far as the major challenges that I see aren't really adopting the OSCAL tool itself, although that's probably, there's probably going to be a significant ramp up of getting people that can, code in it and that sort of thing. The biggest challenge I see is whether it gets broad adoption or not. And it's really that kind of basic. Is that at the end of the day, we are going to have just an ever expanding web of mostly cloud services, a lot of stuff over the CI/CD and DevSecOps pipelines too. That's another factor that's significant. But the biggest challenge is, to me, is kind of being assured that you're not the first person with the fax machine. Okay, so the idea that there's a critical mass of people and vendors, particularly on the commercial side, that have bought into something like this, so I can snap in all of my different systems on this. Because as I'll say, I'll just repeat what I said before. It's not just the ATO anymore. I mean, we're kind of past that into operationally right now. If you get a BOD, a significant BOD or significant EOD, that's almost like a mini control family in and of itself to remediate. Okay, I mean, and it's not generally expressed that way. It's not expressed in the fact that, hey, EOD such and such and such and such affects the control family, AC this or SC that or something like that. It's not expressed in those terms. You're basically given the order, and then you have to back in to 853 or whatever control family it is to figure out how that impacts your security plan. Okay, because you didn't do an RMF for it. You didn't go through an RMF cycle. It's basically an order that came in operationally in the form of a mandate from usually from CISA, occasionally from OMB. So, you know, where I see this as a big challenge and the big promise of this is that OSCAL can back into being the translation device to solve a very wicked problem, okay, which is the fact that all of these competing standards aren't necessarily looking at things the same way. As a thought experiment, go into some of the NIST guidelines, go into 853, go into 837, 137, 160, all of those, and then look up the definition of a requirement, okay? And you'll see that depending on the SP, the requirement's going to be subtly different, okay, the definition of it. So that we've got, again, we're not going to get to a point where we're going to have less frameworks. But what this thing can do, if it's widely adopted, is that it's going to be able to bridge all of these different frameworks. And eventually over time, all of them are going to consolidate. And I think that's going to be a really great thing for everybody, because it's going to take away a lot of the seams that we've got, particularly between cloud and on-prem. You know, I think there's a lot. This is a very, very promising, very promising technology, honestly. The major challenge, again, just to kind of recap, the major challenge is you go off to adopt it, and there's just not a critical mass of people to doing it. That's the big risk to me onto it. So
thank you.
Get more on it.
Thank you, Randy. Quick pause here. Well, question number 3, we're going to have that up on the screen here shortly, and that'll be the end of our poll questions. So please, again, take a minute to respond. But I do want to turn it back over to Michaela now. And before we finish our discussion, I definitely want to round out with some practical transition strategies that can be used to vet and slowly introduce OSCAL-based tools and strategies into federal agencies' FISMA ATO processes. So, Michaela, if you could please share your thoughts on that with us.
Sure, but if I may take one tiny step back and, from our perspective, address the challenges that were listed by the previous speakers. So, what we saw in the past 2 years since 2021, when we released OSCAL 1.0, was understanding of OSCAL and of OSCAL benefits was extremely challenging. And we've been working diligently with the community to present that, what OSCAL is, what the benefits are. OSCAL is not a tool. OSCAL is not going to magically, as Shane said, put some dust in there, sparkling one, and it's going to give you what you are expecting. It is very important of balancing the investment of time and resources necessary for the process of adopting OSCAL to to allow for maximization of the returns. Because if you take monolithic SSPs and you try to just convert them automatically in a machine readable formats, because you put that in JSON or you put that in XML with some tags in there, you really do not get any benefit unless you break down all those requirements and the satisfaction of the controls to the finest granularity possible to be able to identify safeguards and be able to operate on them and test them and complete the cycle and doing the reporting and do that continuous monitoring of everything that you have on your system. You're not going to get the maximum benefit. You're not going to be disappointed. OSCAL is adopted internationally. I'm very proud to say from Australia government that publish out their catalog of controls in OSCAL, to Center of Internet Security, to Cloud Security Alliance, CCM version 4 in OSCAL, to different other countries, Europe, to certification programs in Europe under European Union Cybersecurity Act. It makes us proud, but if you try to cut corners, you are not going to see the results. Mass adoption, if you're expecting to magically be able to learn to develop a machine language, to write in that machine language, and if you are just a security expert, you care of the information that is captured there. You don't care of how that is represented. That's for machines to interpret. And it's very robust, but it's very ample because it has a lot, it breaks down and it tags everything for the machines to understand. Developers, our developers, I can do that directly as code, but that's not what the expectation is. So where we need help from the community is more community engagement of developing tools. And there are several GRC tools out there, editorial tools, GRC tools for experts to be able to use them. So coming together as united force to be able to advance our technology and to empower our next generation of experts with proper GRC tools and processes, I think it's very important. Now, as strategy, we try to eat our own dog food as well, and actually we've done some of that with ATARC in the past as well. We are following the principle on, see one, do one, teach one. This is coming from the medical field. So you see how somebody does something, how they implemented OSCAL, how a system information is represented in OSCAL, and how the process is. You do one yourself, you do a pilot, and then you teach others to move towards the mass adoption. To answer Sarbari, I think she was pointing out, or it was more a question, tools can be easier integrated, but we demonstrated this with our pilot that just by using the CI/CD actions, the CI/CD pipeline or the actions from GitHub, we were able to basically put in place all our process, and we demonstrated that as a simple use case scenarios to take a simple SSP of an application that sits on AWS that is pushed through the entire process automation of the controls, and we show that inheritance as well there by sitting on top of AWS service. Of course, those were done for research purpose, not for operational. It was for demonstration purpose. It's do want to make sure that what we are claiming is doable. But there are also tools out there that are doing in the communities maintaining information themselves. There is the OSCAL Club and the OSCAL.io driven by the community, where all community members can go and share what they are doing.
Thank you, Michaela. And Sabari, is there anything you'd like to add here before we move into our key takeaways from this discussion? And you're muted.
Sure. Mute dance. Yes, I wanted to make a couple of points, which is, some of the things we are seeing in that are kind of challenging for agencies as they even look at OSCAL or think of adopting OSCAL-based tools. Those are some of the things are like relentless ATO cycles. all the systems have to be authorized and reauthorized in a certain cycle. There are very clear deadlines and milestones, etc. So where within this relentless cycle do you fit in getting used to new tools like OSCAL tools and to kind of introduce them within the agency? And also most of our agency customers, they have a mandate to use a particular GRC tool. So even if they like a, let's say, bright and shiny new OSCAL-based GRC tool that they would like to adopt, it is very challenging because there's a lot of hurdles to cross before that OSCAL GRC tool could be approved for use. But additional hurdles that we see are that if a new tool based on OSCAL is to be implemented within the agency, it itself has to go through the ATO process, in order for it to be used to sort of capture security related information for the agency. And so that's a big deal in itself. And I think as some of the poll results showed, OSCAL training is really, really important because most people, they've maybe even heard of the acronym, but they don't really know what it means or how to use it. It's not something, as Michaela said, you're not expecting human beings to be able to write OSCAL formatted, data. That should be done by machines, but to even understand it enough as a tool or as a language and what the benefits are, that's something that requires a lot of training. Yeah, I guess I could go on, but time is short, so let me stop there.
Yes, well, thank you so much. So yeah, I want to give us each a couple minutes time here to share sort of your key takeaway from this whole discussion, or the thing that you really want to leave our audience with here today. And again, this is all recorded. It'll be up on our YouTube channel. So folks at home, you can always refer back to this content later. But let's start off with Shantae, if you don't mind. What is it that you want our audience to really bring home with them today?
So one of the things that, listening to the panel and just being involved with the OSCAL effort from different facets, I think that this is something that we will have to figure out internally how to embrace it, how to socialize it, how to show people what's the benefits out of using this tool. Like I said, here at CMS, we've been involved in some of the work groups. We're asking our cloud service providers that we're sponsoring to start documenting their stuff in OSCAL. We've worked with the GSA on a couple of projects relating to OSCAL. So we're trying to figure out, how do we socialize it? How can we adopt it as an agency? And one of the things that we are exploring currently is can we leverage a GRC tool that can ingest the OSCAL language, because we're worked on creating our current policy, our ARS 5.0, into the OSCAL language. And so really it takes time to see the benefits and more time to kind of show the benefits and get people on board. And then also getting people trained on how to use the solution. And then also the adoption of it being integrated in your DevSecOps pipeline. I hear that a lot. And then also there's a lot of native security functionalities in the cloud that it can integrate with, and getting those things coupled in there. So really the effort would be minimum to actually putting the information in that JSON or XML format. You can grab that information out of a technology or tool stack instead of doing that, but that it's going to take time, right? So really at our agency, we're taking baby steps. We're very familiar with the language. We're trying to socialize it, look for additional resources to help us support it from within the agency. And like I said, we've been supporting the FedRAMP PMO office on different initiatives with OSCAL. So it's going to take some time for it to get fully adopted, but we're on the path to kind of start that trajectory that way and getting people on board. So I just wanted to say to everybody who's listening, it's very new, and we have very different iterations of it out there now. You just got to learn to take time and start socializing and having conversation with those key personnel, whether it's your DevOps lead, whether it's someone in security or in operations, and just start socializing it and seeing how that can be implemented at your agency and what changes do you need to make in order to adopt this. I think that's the key, is just having that conversation and dialogue. And our CISO is very open to share this with all the folks at our group from a leadership level to say, you know, if we adopt this, this is how we can reduce the time frame, the burden of an authorization or an assessment process by leveraging this capability in our environment.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being here today. And let's hear, of course, and Randy, let's hear from you next.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on this. It's been great. I've learned a lot. And so, you know, I'll just go back to my original problem statement is that we've got just too many standards and frameworks out there. Okay, back to Proposition 1. Proposition 2 is the number of standards and frameworks are not likely to go down. They're likely to go up. Proposition 3, you're going to need something. You're either going to keep doing, which is a very labor-intensive, keep doing what we're doing, which is a very labor-intensive sweat equity type of drill to engage smart people in, you know, essentially the transaction-oriented work of reconciling all of these controls and control frameworks. Okay. Further, there's a problem with even doing that because we're going to get the requirement come down to heavily automate all of this, either through the auspices of Zero Trust or DevSecOps CI/CD, or both, or all three, depending on how you look at it. So it's not really an option. Something like this, you know, it has got to be out there. I mean, we just can't. I don't think you can indefinitely do what we're doing, which is manually kind of doing a manual process on information systems that flow information as fast as we do now. Okay, containers and CI/CD and everything else. The velocity of information changes going out there is absolutely breathtaking, and the controls system that we've got does not currently reflect it. It's too slow, and frankly, it's too disaggregated too. So which is another piece. I'll just leave this. You know, one of the things that's interesting to me is that I think I'm way ahead to kind of spur adoption of this. Is we saw something similar with this in the vulnerability management space. I mean, before, you know, you had SCAP, okay, and SCAP at some point, it was a joint, and I don't know if anybody even mandated it. I think the mandate came later, but SCAP kind of grew out of government, and it grew out of I think it was MITRE, and then it grew into then everybody said, hey, it's got to be SCAP formatted in order for us to get the vulnerability information to talk cross-platform. Maybe OSCAL's got a similar kind of future regarding controls, okay, that you get and evangelize it enough so that it's embedded into the GRC platforms, and it's going to be embedded into some sort of policy on the government side, and then maybe that will spur the thing to critical mass so that everybody uses it, which is a really critical point, which is the adoption. And Kale, I'm glad to hear it, that we've got broad adoption of it. That's the other piece of it, particularly in a cloud-based world. I don't have control over I do not have control over all the controls that I'll snap into. Okay, I have my controls and I have a FedRAMP attestation of some sort. Okay, that somebody has looked at their stuff. That's not going to cut it going on in the future. Right now, I'm getting lots of pressure to kind of look deeper into the cloud providers, and it was never imagined just years ago that I would be asking the cloud for particularly for below the line controls. That is kind of coming into the discussion right now. So, you know, having them and having the commercial actors on something like OSCAL, that simplifies the discussion greatly, because it doesn't make it episodic. It doesn't mean where I have to go every 6 months or 3 months or whatever and go say, hey, how have your controls changed in the cloud provider? What have you done over there? So I can re-document my stuff. Yeah.
Randy, I think we're having a
problematic.
You know, it's breaking up a little bit at the end.
What's that?
Remind you back.
Yeah, so very good. So again, the adoption part of this is really clear, is really key, and that's my big takeaway of it. My takeaway is I'm gonna implement this as soon as I can, probably within the year, and see, and hopefully it's a good game.
Thank you, Randy. We really appreciate you being here today. And Dr. Gupta, of course, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, we are kind of running short on time, but to me, from our perspective, it's a very promising technology that's out there. And the hope is that, agencies will be able to do their authorizations faster, cheaper, better, with better quality, with less errors, if there's a more widespread adoption and use of OSCAL-based tools to support the process.
Thank you. And we will end with you, Michaela.
Oh, thank you. OSCAL is disruptive, but my advice to the audience is to not fear it, embrace it, be curious, and try to use it because you're not going to regret it. If you want more information, if you go to www.nis.gov/OSCAL, that's our website, or reach out to oscal@nis.gov is our team, and we are here to help.
Fantastic. Well, we are ending right on time. So thank you all so much. Last poll question. If you'd like to receive your CPE credit, please let us know. And for those still hanging out online, we do have our quantum speaker series. The next one coming up is Kate Weber. She's the interim global lead for emerging technology policy over at Google. So you can join us for that if you're interested. But thank you all so much for our panelists and the folks at home. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. I'm looking forward to the next one already.